It was Thursday evening when Derek dropped the bomb. I was in the middle of organizing the kitchen, checking the plumbing under the sink for leaks, when I heard the front door slam. The sudden noise made the picture frames on the wall rattle. I stood up, wiping my hands on a cloth, and turned to find him standing there, arms crossed, an air of finality in his posture. "We need to talk about Saturday," he said, his voice clipped. I raised an eyebrow, wiping the last bit of grace from my hands and setting the wrench down on the counter. The housewarming party we'd been planning for weeks, just a small get-together with friends, was the next day. It was supposed to be a celebration of our new life together. But now, his tone suggested this wasn't going to be about food, drinks, or who was bringing what. "What about Saturday?" I asked, already sensing that something was off. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, as though preparing for a speech he had rehearsed 100 times. "I've invited someone," he said, "someone important to me, and I need you to stay calm about it. In fact, you need to be mature about it, or frankly we're done." I felt a flash of surprise, then a chill. His words landed like a slap, cold and deliberate. This wasn't a discussion, it was a demand, an ultimatum, a corporate memo masquerading as a conversation. "Who did you invite?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nicole," he said simply, his eyes watching me closely, as though he was bracing for the storm. "Nicole, his ex-girlfriend." The name hit me like a punch to the gut, though I tried not to show it. I had known about her, of course. She'd been in our conversations far too often for comfort, a shadow in our relationship. He still followed her on social media, always claiming, blocking people is immature. But this was different. He had invited her to our party. To our party. I set the wrench down on the counter with a soft clink, my mind racing as I tried to process what he'd just said. He'd invited his ex-girlfriend to our home, to the party we had been planning together, to the place we had shared for the past few months. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt right. "You invited your ex to our housewarming party." "Yeah," he said, "Nicole and I are still friends, good friends. And if you have a problem with that, maybe you're just not as confident as I thought." His words stung, cutting deeper than I was willing to admit. He wasn't just asking for tolerance, he was testing my patience, making me feel small for even questioning it. He was looking at me now, waiting for a reaction, expecting me to argue, to get upset, to fight for our relationship the way he wanted me to. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I kept my face neutral. "Well, if Nicole is important to you," I said, my voice calm, almost detached, "she's certainly welcome." His expression flickered for just a moment, confusion crossing his face before he regained his composure. "Really, you're not upset?" "Absolutely no problem," I said, turning my back to him, reaching for the sink to tighten a fitting. "I'll be very calm, very mature." His confusion deepened, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. He expected a fight, but I wasn't going to give him that. He had pushed me to the edge, but I wasn't going to fall into the trap. Not this time. "Well, great," he said, his shoulders finally relaxing. "I'm glad you're not going to make a big deal out of this. I was worried you'd get weird about it." His relief was palpable, but I saw through it. He didn't understand. He thought he had won, but he didn't know what I was planning. Not yet. I turned back to the sink, finishing the task I had started. The faucet turned on without a hitch, no leaks. My hands were steady as I dried them on a cloth. I reached for my phone, pretending to scroll through messages as if nothing had changed. But inside, I was already making my plans. Later that night, after he had gone to bed, I packed my bags quietly. There was no dramatic outburst, no tears, just a quiet, determined exit. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't going to stay in a relationship that made me feel small. Not anymore. By the time he woke up the next morning, I would be gone, and when he realized what I had done, it would be too late. The hours passed in a strange, detached rhythm. Derek was oblivious, lost in his own excitement about the party. He went on and on about the details: who was coming, what food to order, what decorations to put up. As if everything was perfectly normal, as if nothing had shifted between us. I let him talk, nodding occasionally, my mind elsewhere. It wasn't even about the party anymore. It wasn't even about Nicole. It was about something deeper, something I had ignored for too long. My own sense of self, my dignity. I knew that leaving wasn't just about escaping Derek's demands. It was about reclaiming myself. I couldn't be the person who silently accepted disrespect, hoping things would magically get better. I had done that for far too long. I started making mental notes of what I would take, what I could leave behind. The sentimental things, my grandfather's old watch, the framed family photos, those were going with me. The rest, the things we had bought together, the items that represented our shared life, would stay behind. They no longer held any meaning for me. Derek could keep them if he wanted. They were just things. By the time the clock hit midnight, the decision was made. The feeling of finality settled over me like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had done the hard part. Now it was about executing my plan. The next morning, I woke up before him. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. Derek was still sleeping, his face soft and peaceful, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. I dressed quickly, choosing a simple outfit: jeans, a plain shirt, comfortable shoes. I didn't want to make a fuss. This wasn't about making a dramatic statement, it was about quietly reclaiming my life. In the kitchen, I moved with purpose, packing the last of my things, the tools I had bought for work, the bag with my laptop and personal items, a few shirts, some toiletries. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything. I sent a quick text to Ava. Is the spare room still available? Her reply came instantly. Always has been. What's up? I smiled, feeling the tension in my chest ease. I'll tell you Saturday. Just need a place to stay for a while. No questions, no judgment. Ava knew. She was the one person who wouldn't ask for explanations, wouldn't make me feel like I had to justify my choices. I slipped my phone into my pocket and went into the bedroom. Derek was still asleep. I could hear his steady breathing, see the faintest rise and fall of his chest. He was oblivious to the fact that I was already walking away from him, that our life together was already over. I walked out of the bedroom, gathering my things and slipping them into my car. My hands were steady, moving with precision. There was no hesitation. I wasn't looking back. When I returned, the apartment was just as I left it, quiet, familiar, but now filled with the weight of what I had done. I went through the motions of tidying up, cleaning the countertops, wiping down the kitchen. There was no point in leaving a mess. The clean exit was part of the process. Later, Derek came home, his energy buzzing from the excitement of the party he was preparing. He was talking about the decorations, asking if I had seen the new lights he'd bought, how the pizza order was going. I nodded, pretending to be interested, pretending to care. Inside, I was already gone. My mind was already far from him. You okay? He asked, glancing over at me with a smile, as if everything were normal. Yeah, I said, keeping my tone neutral, just thinking. He smiled, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Well, everything's ready for tomorrow. It's going to be great. We're finally going to have everything we've been working for. I forced a smile. Definitely a turning point. He didn't notice the coldness in my voice, the way I wasn't really looking at him. It was all so easy for him to ignore, to pretend everything was fine. But I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't pretending. After dinner, we decorated the apartment together. I hung the twinkling lights in the living room, while he directed where everything should go. He was full of excitement, talking about the party, about how perfect it was going to be. I played along, even offered to help with the final touches. But all the while, I was thinking about what I would take with me, what I would leave behind. I was already calculating the hours, the minutes, until my final exit. The night passed, and I could feel the tension rising, thickening in the air. He was preparing for the party, and I was preparing for my escape. As he went to shower, I started moving things, not all at once, just small, discreet items, my laptop, a few clothes, my personal papers, the things that mattered most. I made sure to hide them in my car before he came out, wrapped in a towel, his face still glowing with excitement. He had no idea that by the time tomorrow came, everything would have changed. What are you wearing tomorrow? He asked, his voice casual as if nothing was wrong. Probably jeans and a shirt, maybe that navy blue one, I answered, giving him nothing but a calm, neutral reply. Perfect, he said, oblivious to the fact that this was the last conversation we would have as a couple. I couldn't bring myself to tell him. I couldn't bring myself to give him that satisfaction. He thought we were still a team, still partners, but in my mind, I had already walked out that door. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, I stared at the ceiling. I could hear my phone vibrating on the nightstand, but I didn't check it. The messages could wait. I already knew what I had to do. When morning came, I was ready. The morning came, and the air felt heavier than had the day before. Derek was already awake, bustling around the apartment, prepping for the party. I could hear him in the kitchen, clattering around with the dishes and organizing the snacks like everything was just fine, as if nothing had changed. I had made up my mind. There was no turning back. Today was the day I would leave, and there was nothing Derek could do to stop me. I pulled myself out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. The sun was barely up, casting a soft glow through the blinds. But I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. There was no going back. I dressed quickly, choosing a pair of jeans and a simple top, nothing too fancy. It wasn't like I was getting ready for a party. I was getting ready to make the cleanest break I could, without fanfare, without drama. I walked into the kitchen, where Derek was already pouring coffee, humming to himself. His back was to me as he stirred his drink, completely unaware of the storm that had been brewing in the space between us for weeks. He turned, giving me that warm, distracted smile he always did, as if he hadn't just set the stage for everything to fall apart. "Good morning," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "I'm just making the last few adjustments for the party. Can you believe it? We've been planning this for weeks, and tonight it all comes together." I smiled at him, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, I can't believe it either." He looked at me like I was the one who was supposed to be excited, as if we were still on the same page. But we weren't. We hadn't been for a long time. I didn't want to argue, didn't want to waste the last few moments of our life together on words. So, I kept quiet, choosing instead to sip my coffee and let the silence between us grow. He had no idea that, in just a few hours, this whole charade would be over. After breakfast, Derek went on about last-minute details. The decorations, the food, the drinks. He made a list, asked if I had checked the ice, and reminded me again about Nicole. "She's bringing 2 bottles of that Pinot Noir we love," he said, his eyes practically sparkling. "I'm so glad you're not going to make a scene about her being here. I was worried you'd get weird, you know." I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't a happy laugh. It was more like a bitter, hollow sound. "No, I won't get weird," I replied, my voice flat. "It's fine. Just let me know when everyone starts arriving." He seemed to take that as the answer he wanted, though something in his eyes flickered, unsure. Maybe he was expecting a bigger reaction. Maybe he wanted to see me fight for him, beg for him, ask him to reconsider. But I wasn't going to give him that. I had already given him more than enough of myself. I spent the rest of the morning running through the motions, moving through the apartment like a ghost, packing a few more things in between his incessant party planning. I made sure to pack my personal items, the things I needed for my life outside this mess. Nothing he could follow, nothing that tied me to him anymore. My savings, my important documents, my laptop. I even took a few things he wouldn't miss, the photos of my family, my watch from my grandfather. Those were the things that mattered. Not the furniture, not the kitchenware. Those things weren't mine anymore. By the time noon rolled around, I had everything packed into my car, hidden away in the trunk. Derek was too busy setting up lights in the living room to notice that I was slipping away. I had just enough time before the first guests began arriving. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cold air. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks finally started to ease. This was it. I made my way to the store, taking my time in the aisles. I wasn't really shopping for anything, just buying a few bags of ice and some extra beer. It felt oddly calming to be in control of something, to move at my own pace. The hum of the supermarket, the simple task of picking out the items I needed, was a strange comfort. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't rushing to please anyone else. I wasn't trying to fit into some mold Derek had crafted for me. I was making my own decisions. I stood in the checkout line, exchanging pleasantries with the cashier, her voice a dull hum in the background. All I could think about was the apartment. What would Derek be doing when he realized I was gone? What would he say when he saw the empty space where I'd been, the quiet where I had once been? I pushed the cart slowly toward the car, trying to ground myself in the moment, to stay calm. I had done it. I had already started my exit, and it was going to happen. No more second guessing. No more wondering if I was making a mistake. I was doing this for me. When I got back to the apartment, Derek was still distracted, focused on the decorations. He didn't notice that I had already taken my things, didn't see that I was no longer the person who had been there just a few hours ago. His back was turned as I unloaded the ice and beer, placing them carefully in the fridge, making sure everything was set up the way he expected. I moved with purpose, one last time, before my final step was taken. When I turned to face him again, he was smiling, already lost in his preparations. "You're being so good about this," he said, laughing lightly. "It's like you're totally fine with it." I nodded, my lips curling into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I am fine with it, Derek. Totally fine." It was the last lie I would ever tell him. The morning of the party arrived, and everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. The apartment, with its party decorations and food preparations, felt like a stage set for a performance I no longer wanted to be part of. Derek, excited and clueless, hummed around the apartment, adjusting this, tweaking that, making sure everything was just right for his grand evening. I was still pretending to be a part of it all, maintaining my calm facade, as if nothing was out of place. But inside, it was a different story. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I was leaving. There was no turning back. This was my escape, and it was going to happen without a single dramatic outburst. No yelling, no begging. Just a clean break. I had already packed everything that mattered. My personal items, my tools, the things that defined my life before him, my passport, my laptop, my old photos, and the heirloom watch from my grandfather, all packed and hidden in my car, waiting for the moment I would leave this chapter of my life behind. I walked into the kitchen, where Derek was preparing snacks for the party. He didn't even look up when I walked in. It was like he was operating in a world that didn't involve me, lost in his excitement, oblivious to the fact that I was already gone. "Can you help with the drinks?" he asked, turning toward me with a smile. "I want to make sure everything's perfect for tonight." I nodded, walking to the fridge to grab a few bottles of soda. I kept my movements slow, deliberate, as if I was still invested in the party, but every movement felt like a countdown. The seconds were ticking down, and soon, I'd be walking out of that door for good. I could feel the tension building in the air, thick and almost unbearable. I thought about how easy it would be to just slip away, to leave without a trace, but I couldn't. That wouldn't be me. I wasn't going to sneak away like some coward. I would be honest. I would walk out, head held high, knowing I was doing what was best for me. The clock on the wall ticked, and I could feel time slipping away. I could already imagine the guests arriving, laughing, chatting, and Derek oblivious to the fact that, in just a few hours, everything would unravel. I could hear the laughter in my mind, the sound of his perfect evening being shattered. It would all start with a single sentence, a single moment of truth. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't going to let him make me feel small anymore. "You okay?" Derek asked, looking at me with a raised eyebrow, his tone casual. "You seem a little distant today." I smiled, as calmly as I could, though I could feel the coldness inside me creeping to the surface. "I'm fine. Just thinking." He nodded and returned to his work, completely unaware of what was happening. He had no idea what I was planning, no idea how everything was about to change. I had been planning this for days, and now it was finally happening. I could feel the weight of it, the finality of it, and I didn't regret it for a second. After a few more minutes, I excused myself and went into the bedroom. I grabbed my bag, slipping in a few last-minute items I'd forgotten, the essentials. No more hesitation. I went back to the living room to make sure everything was in place, and that's when I noticed the look in Derek's eyes. He was so focused on getting everything right that he didn't see the emptiness in my eyes. He didn't see how far I had already gone in my mind. The guests would start arriving soon. And when they did, I would be ready. I walked out of the room, moving toward the door with the same calm precision that had defined my exit plan. But I stopped just before the door. A glance over my shoulder confirmed what I already knew. Derek was still lost in his world, unaware of mine. I opened the door quietly, stepping out into the hallway. The door clicked shut softly behind me. It felt almost surreal, like I was stepping into a new life, one that didn't involve him, one where I wasn't being suffocated by his demands. The silence in the hallway was soothing, calming, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. No more pretending, no more accommodating his needs. It was just me now. I walked down the stairs to my car, the weight of the world lifting with every step I took away from the apartment. I knew this was the right choice. There was no turning back. I drove away, the city stretching out before me, but all I could think about was the apartment I had just left behind. Derek's world was still spinning, his guests arriving, his perfect party unfolding, and he would never know what had really happened until it was too late. Until the silence set in, until the realization hit him that I was gone. By the time he figured it out, I would be long gone. And this time, I wouldn't be coming back. I didn't expect it to feel this quiet. The world outside the car was still buzzing with life, cars speeding by, people chatting on street corners, the hum of the city in the distance, but inside, everything felt suspended, like time had stopped for a moment. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this free. Every mile I drove, Every turn I made away from the apartment felt like I was shedding an old skin. I couldn't stop thinking about Derek. I couldn't stop picturing the look on his face when he finally realized I was gone. It wasn't even anger that fueled me. It was just the cold certainty that I had done the right thing. I wasn't going to play his games anymore. I wasn't going to pretend I was okay when he kept pushing me aside for the past. The weight of it all hit me again as I parked the car in front of Ava's place. I took a deep breath before stepping out, making sure everything was in order. Ava was already standing outside, leaning against her truck with a beer in hand. Her eyes met mine as I approached, a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite place flickering in her gaze. "You actually did it, you crazy woman," she said, a laugh escaping her lips as she looked me up and down, taking in the expression on my face. "I told you I would," I said quietly, my voice steady. Ava shook her head, a soft whistle of disbelief leaving her mouth. "I didn't think you'd go through with it. Honestly, I thought you'd change your mind at the last minute." I didn't reply, though a small, tight smile tugged at my lips. Ava knew me better than anyone, and she knew I'd been teetering on the edge for months. But this wasn't a decision made in a moment of anger. It was a decision I had been preparing for, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself until now. Ava reached for the door, pulling it open for me. "Come on, let's get you inside. I've got a feeling tonight's going to be a long one." As I stepped inside, the weight of the past few hours began to settle over me. I couldn't stop thinking about Derek, about the way he would be standing in the middle of the apartment, probably asking everyone where I had gone, convinced I'd just stormed off in a fit of jealousy. He would think I was mad, dramatic, maybe even overreacting. But I knew better. I knew the truth. I was walking away from someone who didn't respect me, someone who had been stringing me along while holding on to the past. I sat on the couch, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. Ava didn't ask anything else. She just handed me a beer and sat next to me, her presence a quiet comfort. I leaned back, allowing myself a moment of peace, even though part of me was still wired, waiting for the next bomb to drop. Ava broke the silence first, her voice low. "So, tell me what happened. What did you say to him?" I took a long sip from the bottle, my mind flashing back to the moment I had walked out of the apartment. I told him. I told him I was leaving for good." Ava raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "And he didn't try to stop you?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. "No, he was too busy congratulating himself for finally getting me to accept Nicole. He thought I was just going to go along with it, like everything was fine. I guess I surprised him." "Surprised him?" Ava echoed, a small smile forming. "You shattered him. Don't think for a second that he wasn't expecting a fight, a scene. You didn't give him the satisfaction." "I didn't have to," I said, my voice stronger now, a sense of finality in my words. "I knew what I had to do. I wasn't gonna beg him to choose me over her. I walked out, clean and simple." Ava nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You know he's probably freaking out right now, right? I'm sure he's calling everyone, trying to figure out where you are." I smirked. "Let him. I don't care anymore, I'm done." The thought of Derek scrambling to piece everything together, his calls and texts flooding my phone, didn't faze me. I had made my decision. The rest was just noise. Ava took a seat next to me, offering me the space to breathe. "You've got this, Presley. You're better off without him. I've never seen you so sure about something before." I felt a sense of calm settle in as I looked around the small, cozy space. This was mine now, this room, this moment, it was all mine. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's life. The phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was from Derek. I opened the message, bracing myself for the onslaught. "Ah, where the hell are you? What do you think you're doing? This isn't you. We need to talk." I set the phone down on the coffee table, not bothering to reply. He didn't need an answer. What was there left to say? Ava leaned back in her chair, watching me as I scrolled through the messages. "You know what's coming next, right?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "He's going to keep trying, he's going to beg. But it's over, for good this time." Ava smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "Good. You deserve more than that." I put the phone down, feeling the weight lift off my chest. There was no more uncertainty. No more games. It was just me now, and for the first time, that felt like enough. The party had barely started when I left. Derek, still caught in his excitement, probably didn't even notice my absence at first. He was too busy with his guests, moving from one group to another, making sure everyone had drinks, chatting like the perfect host he always thought he was. But I knew what was coming. and when it came, it would come fast. The first few hours felt like a blur, people arriving, the music starting, the endless chatter. I could feel the tension building inside me, knowing the moment would come when I would have to face Nicole. She wasn't just Derek's ex. She was the ghost that had always hung around, that shadow I could never quite shake off. And tonight, she would make her entrance, just like Derek had planned. I sat on the couch, pretending to be a part of it all. I smiled at people who walked past, nodded at the ones I recognized, and kept my emotions in check, but I wasn't there. Not really. I was a spectator in a show I no longer wanted to be a part of. And then, just like that, the doorbell rang. The first sign of her arrival. I stood up without thinking, my legs moving on their own. The room fell quiet, the music still playing softly in the background, but everything around me felt muted. The doorbell was the signal. It was time. The moment I had been preparing for. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back at the crowd behind me. I didn't need to see Derek's face, his hopeful expression, or the guests who thought everything was perfectly fine. I just focused on the door, on the moment when I would open it, and it would all change. When I pulled the door open, I saw her standing there. Nicole, tall, confident, with that same triumphant smile that had always made my blood boil. She was holding 2 bottles of wine, expensive looking, probably more than I could afford. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, as if we were old friends, as if she didn't know what was about to happen. "Hey, girl," she said, extending her hand to me, her voice all sweetness and familiarity. I didn't take her hand. I just stared at her, calm, steady. My gaze was unwavering, a challenge she wasn't ready for. I knew it caught her off guard. She probably expected me to put on a brave face, maybe crack a smile, maybe even pretend everything was fine. But I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. "He's yours now," I said, my voice cold, clear and final. Her smile faltered, just a bit, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, holding the bottles, her grip tightening slightly as she processed what I had just said. The silence hung heavy in the air. It felt like the entire apartment was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Behind me, I could hear the whispers starting. People had stopped talking, the murmur of the party slowly dying as the weight of the moment settled over them. No one had expected this. No one had anticipated that I would walk out like this. But there it was. I turned away from Nicole, not bothering to look at her again. I moved past her, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on me. I didn't care. They were all watching. But none of them understood what was happening. None of them knew what it had taken for me to get to this point. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice steady, as if I were still a guest in my own home. "Enjoy the party." I didn't wait for any responses. I didn't care. I walked out of the apartment, the door clicking shut softly behind me, and with it, everything I had left behind. The cool night air hit me the moment I stepped outside, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. The weight of the years with Derek, the years of silence, the years of pretending, all of it lifted in that single moment. I wasn't the woman who had stayed in a relationship out of obligation anymore. I wasn't the woman who kept her mouth shut, who played the part to keep the peace. I was free. I reached my car and got inside, not bothering to look back at the apartment I had just walked out of. The engine roared to life as I pulled out of the parking lot, my hands steady on the wheel. I was driving away from it all, the lies, the manipulation, the constant battle for respect. It was done. I knew Derek would try to reach me, that he would call, text, maybe even show up at my door, but none of that mattered. He could try all he wanted, but it was over. For the first time, I was the one in control. I drove for a while, the city lights flickering in my rearview mirror, and I thought about the apartment I was heading to now. Ava's place. It was small, simple, but it was mine. It was real, and that was enough for me. As I parked in front of her building, I felt the knot in my chest loosen even more. I was going to be okay. I had walked away, and that was all that mattered. I grabbed my things from the car and went inside, Ava already waiting for me. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't need to, we both knew why I was here. "You good?" she asked quietly, her eyes searching mine. "Yeah," I said, my voice firm. "I'm good," and for the first time in a long time, I truly was. The first night after leaving was quiet, but the next day felt like everything had exploded in slow motion. I spent the morning unpacking a few boxes in Ava's apartment, trying to settle into my new reality. When my phone buzzed with a flood of messages, they were all from Derek. "Hey, where the hell are you?" "Ads, what do you think you're doing?" "At, this isn't you. We need to talk." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I read each message. His words were familiar, always the same thing, never giving me the space I needed, always making it seem like I was the one who was wrong. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. Instead, I scrolled through my phone and opened a message from Ava, the only person who seemed to understand what was going on. "How's it going? Anything yet?" I responded almost immediately, needing to take a moment to breathe before diving back into the flood of Derek's attempts at contact. "He's trying to reach me, but I'm not answering. Good for you. Keep it that way. You're better off without him, Presley. He doesn't deserve another second of your time." I put the phone down and leaned back against the couch. The air felt thick with the weight of what had happened, but I wasn't going to let it overwhelm me. I was done with him. Done with his demands, his games, his manipulation. I wasn't going to be dragged back into the chaos of our relationship. Not anymore. By late afternoon, Ava was out running errands, leaving me alone in the apartment. I decided to take a walk, to clear my head. The city was alive with energy, people bustling around, cars honking, the low hum of conversations echoing through the streets. It was all so normal, so mundane. But to me it felt like freedom. I hadn't realized how tightly I had been holding on to the past until it was gone. There were moments when I felt the weight of everything that had happened between Derek and me. How he'd treated me like I wasn't enough. How he'd expected me to put up with things that I had no right to endure. But in the quiet of the city, in the absence of his voice, I felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. As I walked through the park, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from Derek, it was from Maya. "So, what happened after I left?" "I'm hearing some serious rumors about the party." I smiled, even though there was no one around to see. Maya was always the one who knew exactly what to ask, how to get to the heart of things. I quickly typed back, "It was a show, but I didn't stick around for the ending. Walked out, no drama. Left him with his ex, and I'm done." She replied almost instantly, "Damn, that's cold. But honestly, you did what most women can't do. Walk away with your head held high, respect." I felt my chest tighten, but in a good way. Maya understood. She had seen me struggle, had seen the toll Derek's manipulation had taken on me. She knew what it took to walk away. I tucked the phone back in my pocket, and continued my walk. It felt like I was walking towards something new. Like I was leaving the old me behind with every step. When I got back to the apartment, Ava was waiting for me, her face a little more serious than usual. I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew that Derek's calls and messages were starting to weigh on me. "He's probably freaking out by now," she said, setting down a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter. "You've got to know he's not gonna let this go easily." I nodded, my stomach twisting at the thought. "I know, but it doesn't matter. It's over, I'm done." Ava studied me for a moment before speaking again. "You've got this, Presley. I know it's hard, but you're stronger than you realize. He's not the one who gets to define you anymore. You do." Her words hit harder than I expected. I'd known that on some level, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. For so long, I had let Derek's actions and words shape who I was. But not anymore. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my heart was racing in my chest. "Presley, it's me." Derek's voice came through, sounding hoarse, desperate. "Where are you? We need to talk." "I'm sorry, okay. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just come back. Let's talk about this." I stayed silent for a moment, feeling the weight of his words hang in the air. He was still trying to pull me back into his web. I could hear the urgency in his voice, the desperation. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I wasn't going to fall for it. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice steady, stronger than it had been in months. "I've already made my decision. You can't keep dragging me back into this. It's over." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost defeated. "You can't just walk away from this, Presley. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years of manipulation, Derek. 2 years of pretending. I'm not doing it anymore." I hung up before he could say anything else. The silence after I ended the call was deafening. But it was the kind of silence I needed. The kind that made me realize I was finally free. Ava looked at me, waiting for my reaction. "You did it, didn't you?" I nodded slowly, a sense of calm settling over me. "Yeah, I did. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, and I was gonna be okay." 3 months had passed since I walked out of that apartment, and though it had felt like a lifetime at first, now, it felt like nothing more than a distant memory. I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, the sun streaming through the window, casting a warm glow on the walls. The space was small, cozy, but it was mine. I had painted the walls myself, bright yellow that made the whole place feel alive. It felt good, real. No more pretending to be something I wasn't, no more bending myself into the shape he wanted me to be. I was free. I had learned to enjoy the quiet. The solitude that had once been terrifying was now comforting. I could walk through the streets of Seattle, move through my life without the weight of his expectations crushing me. I no longer felt like I was living under a microscope, waiting for him to tell me what I should be doing, how I should feel. But still, there were moments when the past crept up on me. When I'd hear a song or see something that reminded me of him, and for a split second, I'd feel that old tug, guilt, regret, second guessing. But then I'd remember what I had walked away from, how suffocating it had been, how much of myself I had lost just trying to make him happy. I had no idea what he was doing now. I hadn't heard from him directly in a while. He'd tried, of course. There were the desperate texts, the missed calls, the messages from unknown numbers. He had even sent me an email full of apologies, blaming everything on the stress of the relationship, telling me that he never meant to hurt me, that inviting Nicole to the party was just a misunderstanding, as if that could somehow undo everything. I deleted it without a second thought. But as time went on, I heard things. I ran into old friends, acquaintances who knew Derek, and I couldn't help but notice how they looked at me differently now. There was a kind of quiet respect in their eyes, like they saw me as someone who had broken free from something that had held her back for far too long. It wasn't that I wanted revenge. I didn't want him to suffer. But seeing him flounder without me, seeing him try to pick up the pieces of a life I had walked away from, made me realize how much power I had been giving him. How much of my life I had let him control. A few weeks ago, Maya told me that Derek had moved back to San Diego. Apparently, he couldn't afford the apartment anymore. The rent, the bills, all of it caught up with him. He had ended up back at his parents' house, which, I have to admit, brought a sense of satisfaction I didn't expect. He wasn't thriving like he thought he would. He wasn't the golden boy who had it all together. I smiled to myself when I heard that he had lost the one person who had always been there for him, the one who would have stood by him, no questions asked. But he'd chosen to hurt me, to manipulate me, and now, he was dealing with the fallout. The universe had a funny way of evening the score. It was just a few days ago that I ran into Liam, one of Derek's friends. He was sitting at a coffee shop, looking a little worse for wear. He looked up in surprise when I walked in, but quickly covered it up with a forced smile. "Hey Presley," he said, standing up, "didn't expect to see you here." I returned his smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Just here for coffee," I said. "You?" He hesitated for a moment before sitting back down. "Actually, I just saw Derek the other day. He's not doing so great." I raised an eyebrow, not surprising. He never was as great as he thought he was. Liam looked down at his cup, stirring it absently. "Yeah, well, he hasn't been the same since you left. People keep asking about you, and I have no idea what to tell them. They want to know what happened. Why you left." I looked at him, not saying anything for a moment. "What do you think happened?" Liam shifted uncomfortably. I think you did the right thing. I don't know the full story, but I can see that he wasn't treating you right, not like he should have been." I smiled again, but this time, it felt real. "I don't need anyone's approval, Liam. I did what was best for me." He nodded slowly, like he understood, but still seemed unsure. "Well, you're a hell of a lot stronger than I would have been in your shoes. I give you props for that." I could tell he was trying to make me feel better about what I had done. It was sweet of him, but I didn't need validation anymore. I didn't need anyone to tell me I'd made the right choice. I already knew. "Well," I said, standing up, "I'm glad he's finally learning that actions have consequences." Liam smirked, but his eyes were sympathetic. "Yeah, he's still trying to figure that out. But I'm glad you're doing well. Honestly, you look different, in a good way. You've got this light about you." I met his gaze, my chest tightening slightly. "I'm finally where I belong, Liam, and that's enough." I walked out of the cafe, leaving the past behind once again. The city felt different now. Every corner, every street felt like it was mine. There were no more shadows hanging over me. There were no more echoes of his voice, no more whispers of doubt. I had made it, and I was stronger for it. A text from Ava popped up as I walked down the sidewalk. Usual place, pool night. You coming? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'll be there in 20. This was my life now. No more running, no more second guessing. Just me, the woman I had become. And the world that was waiting for me to take it.